Hello again. We have become so used to peace in Europe over the last 70 years or so that the sudden start of a major war in that continent is bound to seem a little bit disturbing. When we in Britain hear that the Prime Minister has been to a conference in Munich, it does rather tend to remind us of a similar occasion in 1938. Then, when we hear that a European country has been invaded and the Prime Minister is about to address the nation, it is perhaps inevitable that our thoughts will turn to Neville Chamberlain saying on the wireless, "I am speaking to you from the Cabinet Room at 10 Downing Street. This morning the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note saying that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us." In other words, we are inclined to think about the opening of the Second World War. A lot of people I've heard talking about this lately have the feeling, or they say that they wonder if this is how it felt at that time, before the Second World War and also before the First World War. Can a comparison be made between the way things were in 1939 and what is now happening? There are some ominous parallels. In 1938 and 1939, various countries throughout the world were all trying to seize territory and do terrible things when they thought nobody was looking, or if they thought that nobody would dare stop them. Italy was keen to start an empire in Africa and didn't think that the world would try and stop it doing so. In Spain, General Franco was hoping to take over the whole country. The Japanese were busy carving out a chunk of China, and of course the Germans were determined to grab a few more bits of Europe if they could get away with it. The mood was amongst various, I won't call them wrongdoers, amongst various enterprising nations that while the world was looking in one direction, they might not notice a bit of trouble elsewhere. While everybody is watching the Germans march into Sudetenland, Franco tries to massacre a bunch of Republicans while people are watching in another direction. While the world is outraged at Italian actions in Ethiopia and wringing their hands over that, the Japanese take the opportunity to attack Shanghai. There is definitely an element of that going on right now. Many nations have invasions and attacks that they would dearly like to undertake, and they don't like to do it when everything is peaceful and the world is quiet, because if they invade this or that country or attack such and such minority, if the world's got nothing else to do or nothing else to occupy it, they might all start looking and denouncing them and complaining to the United Nations about what's going on. However, while everybody's watching the Russians, this might be an excellent time to get away with other things for other countries. The Chinese are itching to invade Taiwan and make it part of China again, for instance. That's why the Chinese are agreeing with what Russia is doing. They feel the same way, and they're already trying to draw a parallel between the Russians' actions in Ukraine and the way that they themselves feel about Taiwan. Then Israel has every intention at some point of attacking Iran and destroying the nuclear facilities there, which would of course trigger a war with Hezbollah in Lebanon and very likely Hamas in Gaza as well. Each of these situations could in themselves spread to other parts of the world and drag in other countries. Then too there are countries which would like to grab a piece of some territory or massacre some minority or other, and don't quite like to do it when everything is peaceful in case they get denounced. They will never get a better chance than now while everybody's eyes are on Ukraine. Next door to Ukraine is Moldova, where the Russians have already got troops in a breakaway province of Moldova. Moldova was part of the Soviet Union, and Russia might wish to take it over while they're subduing Ukraine. They might just decide that's another bit of unfinished business they might as well get on with. The longer the fighting goes on in Ukraine, the greater the temptation by other countries to take advantage of the situation and make their own move. Would America and Britain sit back and let China invade Taiwan? Nobody knows. What would happen if Israel did go to war with Iran? Impossible to say. And the problem is that if anything dramatic happened in one of these places and we all start looking there, then the chances grow of people doing foolish and dangerous things at the part of the world we are not looking at. All in all, the world is in a bit of a tricky state at the moment, and one cannot really say how matters will resolve themselves. The business in Ukraine might fizzle out with the installation of a pro-Russian puppet government, but then again it might prove to be the opening sequence in a wider reordering of the world. It's only in retrospect that history looks inevitable. You might have read books or heard various historians point out that the various reasons the First World War was inevitable in 1914, but of course it didn't look that way at the time. Nobody in the late summer of 1914, when they heard about trouble in the Balkans with Serbia, said to themselves, "Oh dear, the First World War has begun." It's the same now. We are balanced on the edge of a knife and none of us really know which way things will go.